South Africa's First Lady Tshepo Motsepe says that the increasing food prices exacerbated by COVID-19 are robbing children of their health and nutrition. Motsepe was guest speaker at the launch of the 15th issue of UCT's publication, the South African Child Gauge on child rights in the country. This year's issue of the publication focuses on child malnutrition and the impact of COVID-19. Feeding programs among vulnerable South African communities play an absolutely crucial role in keeping young children alive and ensuring that they are able to reach their full potential. Early childhood development centers are a core element to the provision of food aid to children from impoverished communities. However, since the start of the pandemic, over 13,000 people employed at these ECDs have lost their jobs, and over 100,000 children were unable to attend ECD programs while the centers were closed. Crucially, there are government stimulus packages available to help overcome this dire situation, but with an upcoming deadline for applications for this assistance of this Friday, 19th February, ECDs are under pressure. For more on this, we're now joined by Marion Wagner, who is the director of Breadline Africa. Very good afternoon to you, Marion. Thank you so very much for joining us here on SABC News this afternoon.
Thank you, Flo. Thank you for having us.
We've heard about the plight of early childhood development centers from early stages of COVID-19 hitting our shores. In fact, we had a few people from ECDs coming to chat to us here. Talk to us about the difficulties in accessing funding, donations, or any sort of aid or help for these ECD centers, and also on the back of that, the work that Breadline Africa does do with ECDs.
Thank you, Flo. Breadline Africa is a non-profit organization that was started 28 years ago. And our primary focus is really on infrastructure and replacing unsafe ECD structures in under-resourced communities. And our main reason for doing that is to provide access to early learning opportunities to ensure educational outcomes for young children. So Breadline Africa converts shipping containers, or we place prefabs, which are classrooms, kitchens, and toilets. And then we also provide primary school libraries and feeding kitchens. So our primary focus is on infrastructure at ECD centers.
Yeah, the launch of the 15th issue of the UCT's publication, the South African Child Gauge on child rights in the country. Of course, this year's issue focusing on child malnutrition and the impact of COVID-19. Let's talk to that, the impact that this pandemic has had on children and on child malnutrition.
It has at the start of the pandemic in March last year. We saw, as soon as the ECD centers were closing, we got calls saying that the children were going to go without their main meal of the day. And for some of the children, it was their only meal of the day.
Yeah.
And when that happened, we stepped into the feeding because we knew that millions of children in South Africa would battle are below the poverty line. So we started supporting 40 different feeding sites nationally. And we engaged with an organization called Yebo Fresh in July last year. They're an organization, a social enterprise. They have a model where they're actually able to deliver fresh food to informal settlements all around Cape Town without getting lost. And that was crucial for us because we needed to get ingredients to community feeding kitchens and to ECD centers. And without the support of Yebo Fresh being able to source fresh vegetables at competitive prices, negotiating bulk deals for us, we would have had a challenge because many of the big food suppliers, their trucks were getting hijacked within the first week of when we were starting to do food runs. And Yebo Fresh know that the different communities, their staff come from those communities, and they were really a lifeline for us to get into those kitchens that were most difficult to access. So we have a tremendous collaboration with Yebo Fresh.
Yeah. Interestingly, the First Lady, Tshepo Motsepe, was a guest speaker at the launch of this publication this year. And I'm wondering, I mean, you as Breadline Africa are assisting and doing great work, as you know, you touched on now briefly. But I'm wondering if there was any discussion at any point about how or what the government will do about these ECD centers. I mean, I'm seeing here that 13,000 people employed at ECDs have lost their jobs, and that really points to a huge crisis prices, which then directly impacts the children who would be getting food from these particular centres. Was there any talk coming from the First Lady about, what can be done or what will be done? I mean, how closer can you get to the government? She is, the wife of the president. So I just wonder if there was any talk about if there is anything further that will be done to help these ECD centres and perhaps get them well functioning again, as some have actually closed down.
I think you're right. That's the really crux of the issue. Many have had to close down or been forced to close down because they simply haven't had the funding. Many non-profits have reached out to those ECD centres to try to help them. So during the pandemic, when they were forced to close, they obviously couldn't pay staff. So many of the staff lost their jobs or were unable, really, they were battling as well. Then when the ECD centres did manage to reopen, the PPE support did not reach many of the centres. So many of them simply just couldn't fund the equipment that they needed. And also being in confined spaces, they couldn't adhere to social distancing requirements. So that meant that less children were being registered at ECD centres. That meant that for many of the ECD centres, they had no income, particularly the unregistered centres, which are the ones that we focus on the most, the ones that don't get the daily subsidy. So when we heard about this stimulus employment relief package, we thought, well, this is a great way that many of the ECD centres will be helped. But it has come with its challenges, yes.
Yeah. All right, Marion, thank you very much for giving us your time here on SABC News. Much appreciated. Thank you.